Have you ever found something that completely changed your life? Imagine walking home one evening. You see something shining on the ground. You pick it up. It is an old key. You have no idea what it opens. But then you notice something strange. There is a small piece of paper attached to it, and on that paper there are only 4 words. Don't trust anyone. What would you do? Would you throw the key away? Would you try to discover the truth? Or would you follow the mystery? Today, you're going to listen to a fascinating English story filled with useful vocabulary, natural expressions, and everyday English. But this is not just a story. It's an English lesson. So listen carefully. Don't worry if you don't understand every word the first time. Juste relax. Listen to the story. Enjoy the mystery. And learn English naturally. After the story, we'll explore important vocabulary and expressions together. This is MysteryVerse, and today's story is called The Mysterious Key. Let's begin. Part 1, The Discovery. It was a cold Friday evening. Daniel was walking home after a long day at work. Et voiture isfiture, and all, sigwana, take a hunch and relax. The streets were quiet. Most of the shops were already closed. The sky was dark, and a cold wind was blowing through the streets. Daniel put his hands into his jacket pockets and continued walking. Suddenly, something caught his attention. There was a small, shiny object lying on the ground. Daniel stopped and looked down. It was a key. Not an ordinary key. It was old and made of silver-colored metal. The key had a strange symbol on it. Daniel picked it up and looked at it carefully. That's strange, he whispered. He looked around. Nobody was there. The street was completely empty. Daniel thought about leaving the key on the ground. Maybe someone would come back for it. But just as he was about to put it down, he noticed something attached to it. It was a small piece of folded paper. Daniel opened the paper. There were only 4 words. Don't trust anyone. Daniel stared at the message. His heart started beating faster. What does this mean? He asked himself. He looked around again. Still no bird. For a moment, Daniel felt nervous. He didn't know why. Maybe it was just an old key that someone had lost. Maybe the message was a joke. But something inside him told him that this was different. Daniel put the key and the paper into his pocket. Then he continued walking home. But no, he wasn't thinking about his tired feet anymore. He was thinking about the key. And one question kept going through his mind. What does this key open? VOCABU Let's pause the story and learn some useful vocabulary. Un or shiny. Shiny means something that reflects light and looks bright. Exemple. The key was shiny. Crepé. The key was shiny. Tout ordinary. Ordinary means normal or not special. Exemple. It wasn't an ordinary key. Repé. It wasn't an ordinary key. Triture symbole. A symbol is a picture or sign that represents something. Exemple. There was a strange symbol on the key. Repé. There was a strange symbol on the key. Fourrure folded. Folded means something that has been bent over itself. Exemple. There was a folded piece of paper. Repère. There was a folded piece of paper. Five bas, nerveux. Nervous means worried, afraid, or uncomfortable about something. Exemple. Daniel felt nervous. Repère. Daniel felt nervous. Part 2. The Strange Dream. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the key. He placed it on his bedside table. Then he looked at it again. The strange symbol seemed familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. At around midnight, Daniel finally fell asleep. Antenne. He had a strange dream. In the dream, he was standing in front of an old house. The house looked abandoned. The windows were broken. The garden was covered with weeds. And the front door was locked. Daniel looked down. The silver key was in his hand. He slowly put the key into the lock. Click. The door opened. Daniel stepped inside. It was dark. Very dark. He heard a noise coming from upstairs. Someone was walking. Step, step, step. Daniel wanted to leave, but he couldn't move. Suddenly, he heard a voice. A quiet voice. A woman's voice. She whispered, "You shouldn't have found the key." Daniel turned around. There was nobody there. Then the voice spoke again. "They know you're coming." Daniel looked toward the stairs. A shadow appeared. Someone was standing at the top of the stairs. Daniel tried to run, but before he could move, "Est occupé?" Daniel sat up quickly in his bed. His heart was beating hard. He looked around his bedroom. Everything was normal. It was just a dream. At least, that's what he thought. Then he looked at his bedside table. His eyes became wide. The key was gone. VOCABU break 2. 1. Abandoned. Abandoned means a place that nobody lives in or uses anymore. Exemple. The house looked abandoned. Repère. The house looked abandoned. Weeds. Weeds are wild plants that grow where they are not wanted. Exemple. The garden was covered with weeds. Repère. The garden was covered with weeds. 3. Whisper. To whisper means to speak very quietly. Exemple. She whispered his name. Repère. She whispered his name. Fourreur et shadow. A shadow is a dark shape made when something blocks light. Exemple. Daniel saw a shadow. Repère. Daniel saw a shadow. 5. Disappear. To disappear means to suddenly go away or become impossible to see. Exemple. The key disappeared. Repère. The key disappeared. Part 3. The message. Daniel jumped out of bed. He searched everywhere. Under his pillow. Inside his jacket. On the floor. But the key was nowhere. Then Daniel remembered the message. Don't trust anyone. He suddenly felt afraid. Someone had put the key in his pocket. Someone had written the message. Butoir? Daniel walked to the window. He looked outside. A black car was parked across the street. Daniel had never seen it before. He watched the car carefully. Nobody was inside. 10. The headlights turned on. Daniel stepped back. The car started moving. Slowly, it drove away. Daniel stood there in silence. He didn't know what to do. The next morning, he decided to tell his best friend, Michael. Michael worked at a small bookstore near Daniel's office. Daniel arrived at the bookstore at 9 o'clock. "Michael, I need to talk to you," Daniel said. Michael looked at his friend. "What's wrong?" Daniel took out his phone and showed him a picture of the key. "I found this yesterday." Michael looked at the picture. His face suddenly changed. "Where did you get this?" "I found it on the street." Michael became quiet. "Daniel!" "What?" "I've seen that symbol before." Daniel's eyes opened wide. "Where?" Michael looked around the bookstore. Then he lowered his voice. "My grandfather had the same symbol." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Your grandfather?" "Yes." "What does it mean?" Michael shook his head. "I don't know." "But you said your grandfather had it." "Yes, he had an old box with that symbol on it." Daniel leaned forward. "What happened to the box?" Michael looked nervous. "My grandfather disappeared 20 years ago." Silence filled the room. Daniel stared at his friend. "Disappeared?" Michael nodded. "Nobody ever found him." Daniel remembered the dream. The old house. The locked door. The mysterious voice. And the words, "They know you're coming." Daniel looked at Michael. "I think I know where the key belongs." Michael's face became pale. "Where?" Daniel slowly answered. "Your grandfather's house." VOCABU break 3. On se cherche. To search means to look carefully for something. Exemple. Daniel searched his room for the key. Repère. Daniel searched his room for the key. 2. Headlights. Headlights are the bright lights at the front of a car. Exemple. The car's headlights turned on. Repère. The car's headlights turned on. 3. Disappear. To disappear means to go missing or become impossible to see. Exemple. Michael's grandfather disappeared 20 years ago. Repère. Michael's grandfather disappeared 20 years ago. Fourré belong. To belong means to be owned by someone or to be connected to someone. Exemple. Who does this key belong to? Repère. Who does this key belong to? 5. Mysterious. Mysterious means difficult to understand or explain. Exemple. It was a mysterious key. Repère. It was a mysterious key. Part 4. The old house. That afternoon, Daniel and Michael drove to the countryside. Michael's grandfather had owned an old house there. The house had been empty for more than 20 years. As they drove closer, Daniel felt a strange feeling in his stomach. He had seen this place before. Not in real life. In his dream. "This is it," Daniel whispered. Michael looked at him. Nothing." They stopped the car. The house was exactly like Daniel remembered. Broken windows. An old garden. Dalle wide. And a large wooden door. Daniel looked at Michael. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Michael nodded. "I need to know what happened to my grandfather." They walked toward the house. Michael pushed the door. It opened with a loud sound. Creak. They stepped inside. The air was cold. Dust covered everything. There were old chairs, tables, and boxes everywhere. Michael turned on his phone flashlight. Where should we look? Daniel thought for a moment. There. They searched the rooms. Nothing. Then Michael noticed something. Daniel. Daniel turned around. Michael was standing next to an old painting. There is something behind this. They moved the painting. Behind it was a small metal door. Daniel's heart started beating faster. There was a lock, and the lock had the same symbol as the key. Daniel looked at Michael. Are you ready? Michael took a deep breath. Ditoit! Daniel took the silver key from his pocket. He put it into the lock. The key turned. Click. The door opened. Inside was a small room. There was a wooden box in the middle. On the box was the same strange symbol. Michael walked toward it. He slowly opened the box. Inside was an old photograph. A notebook. En l'été. Michael picked up the photograph. His hands began to shake. Daniel. Écoute, this is my grandfather. Daniel looked at the photograph. The man was standing next to another person. A woman. Daniel stared at her face. His heart stopped. Eknuer. He had seen her before. In his dream. The woman from the old house. Michael looked at him. Do you know her? Daniel couldn't speak. Then he saw the letter. It was addressed to Michael. To my grandson. Michael opened it and began to read. Part 5. The letter. Michael. If you are reading this letter, then someone has finally found the key. I don't know how much time I have left. There are people who want to find this box. They believe it contains something valuable. But the real secret is not inside the box. The real secret is the truth about what happened to me. 20 years ago, I discovered something I was never supposed to find. I learned that someone close to me was hiding a terrible secret. I tried to tell the truth. But before I could speak, I had to disappear. If you have found this letter, be careful. Don't trust anyone, especially the person who gave you the key. Michael stopped reading. Daniel looked at him. What does that mean? Michael looked confused. I don't know. T'es-tu dans le lit? They heard a noise. Someone was outside. Footsteps. Slow footsteps. Daniel quickly closed the box. Michael turned off his phone flashlight. They stood silently in the darkness. The footsteps came closer. Someone was walking toward the house. Daniel whispered, "Someone is coming." Michael whispered back, "W-H-O." Daniel shook his head. "I don't know." The door slowly opened, and a voice said, "Michael." Michael looked at Daniel. Daniel recognized the voice. It was the same voice from his dream. The woman's voice. "You shouldn't have found the key." Daniel's heart began to race. The woman stepped into the room, and then she said something that changed everything. "Your grandfather is still alive." Ending cliffhanger. And that's where today's story ends. But the mystery is not over. Who is the mysterious woman? Why did Michael's grandfather disappear? Why did Daniel dream about the house before he ever saw it? And, most importantly, who can they trust? You'll have to wait for part 3 to discover the truth. But before you go, let's review some of the vocabulary from today's story. Shiny, reflecting light. Ordinary, normal or common. Nervous, worried or afraid. Abandoned, left empty or unused. Whisper, to speak very quietly. Shadow, a dark shape caused by blocked light. Disappear, to go missing or become unseen. Mysterious, difficult to understand or explain. Search, to look carefully for something. Belong, to be owned by or connected to someone. Excellent work! You have just listened to a complete English story while learning useful vocabulary and natural English expressions. Remember, don't translate every word. First, try to understand the story. Listen to the context. Pay attention to how words are used. Then, repeat the vocabulary aloud. This will help you improve your listening, speaking, pronunciation, and vocabulary naturally. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to MysteryVerse, and turn on the notification bell, and tell us in the comments, what do you think happened to Michael's grandfather? Do you think he is really alive? Write your prediction in the comments. Thank you for learning with MysteryVerse. Keep listening. Keep lire. And remember, every story has a secret. See you in part 3.